Good afternoon, everyone, to our resource speakers, our administrative officials, and faculty researchers. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to day 4 of doing Ethnography Seminar Workshop, sponsored by the VP for Research and Extension of CNSC in partnership with Ugnayang Pang-Aghamtao Incorporated or UGAT, Anthropological Association of the Philippines. So yesterday's sessions were devoted to the discussion about Module 6, which focused on participant interview, participant observation, and rapid ethnographic assessment in the afternoon. While in the morning session, we listened to Module 5, which focused on visual methods in ethnography by Sir Daniel Zhou and Romeo Tori. So for this afternoon, we will now give way to the discussion of Module 7, which will deal on ethics in ethnography. But once again, before we start our session for this afternoon,
Ma'am
just a few
Jocelyn,
reminders.
Ma'am
Yes,
Jocelyn,
ma'am.
yung ethics on ethnography sa Monday afternoon.
Okay, ma'am.
That will be given by Dr. Ami Rara.
So this afternoon, ma'am, we will be focusing on Module 8.
Module 7, Doc Jocelyn, look at the program. There's
Module
another topic.
7, which will be discussing all about material culture and data processing and analysis.
Data processing and analysis for
Okay,
today.
ma'am. So for this afternoon. So just a few reminders po before we start our webinar. Please be informed that we are being recorded and streaming live via FB. So your microphone is muted during the entirety of this virtual event, except when you are recognized to talk. You may also opt to turn off your video. So you are encouraged to ask questions using the chat box publicly. We will be collating questions and raise it during the Q&A part of the webinar. We also want to remind our participants to make sure you have registered using your correct email address. So I guess we're now ready to start our program with a welcome remarks coming from the head of the Intellectual Property Rights and Protection Unit of CNSC. Let's listen to Engineer Leo Agustin P. Vela.
So he became the Engineer Leo, are you okay? Okay, we are just trying to settle the technical glitch. He could not unmute, so ina-address ng technical team.
Hello.
Okay, go ahead, engineer.
Hello,
You're
good
in.
afternoon. Okay, sorry for the technical glitches. To our newly elected President, Dr. Marlo M. De La Cruz, to our esteemed Vice President for Research and Extension, Dr. Josefina Socorro F. Tondo, our dear Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Rosalie A. Almadrones, members of the OVEPRE team composed of Dr. Daniel E. Maligat, Dr. Gurley H. Naval, Dr. Annalyn D. Ramos, and Dr. Edwin R. Echano, our esteemed deans and campus directors that are here with us today, our speakers and guests from Ugnayang Pang-Aghamtao and Anthropological Association of the Philippines, and of course to our dearest participants from all the delivery units, a pleasant afternoon to all. Thank you to each and every one of you for being here with us today. We are very pleased to welcome you all as we continue our journey for this 8-module seminar workshop on doing ethnography. We are now bounding to the 7th module, and after this, we have one more to go. Before we get started, I would like to express my sincerest appreciation and gratitude to all who generously help us make this event come together to become a success. Now, for today's module, you'll be able to learn more about material culture, data processing, and analysis. That will surely help you grow to be more professional, productive, and skilled members of our academic community. I am expressing my high hopes that you'll be able to find this day enriching with new knowledge and learnings. Once again, welcome and good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you so much, Engineer Leo. So we'll now proceed right away with the introduction of our resource speaker for this afternoon. So our resource speaker obtained her Master of Arts in Anthropology from Ateneo de Manila University. She lectures in Ateneo de Manila University and is currently taking her doctoral degree in anthropology with the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Her main interests are qualitative research methods, food, heritage, and human-animal interactions. Friends, let's welcome Ma'am Nota F. Magno to discuss on material culture and data processing and analysis.
Hi,
Dr. Jocelyn, ano, yung data processing ang ano niya, ang topic. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
just a sound check. Am I audible? It's okay lang the...
Yes, yes, Nota, you are being heard. Thank you.
Okay, sige. Good afternoon, everyone. Kamusta tayo? Since I'm not seeing cameras, I'm nagka-calibrate ako. I heard you had a busy morning and then also in the afternoon you had elections. So I hope everyone has had lunch and has rested kasi medyo detailed yung usapan natin to cap this this whole workshop series. Yeah, I hope you have energy for it. Pero if you go through it, kung matyaga kayo with the detail, it can really help you with research in terms of getting your data together to prepare it for analysis. For me, this is a very taken for granted aspect of research. Usually when teachers teach methods, the focus is on data gathering, how to get the data. Pero when you have the data, what are you going to do with all of that data? So that's what I want to talk about today. I'm going to share the PowerPoint na. And let me know if you can see it, if it's working. Can you see it now?
Nota, I can see.
Yeah, okay. So we're going to explore data organization. I call it data organization because it involves many layers of cognitive processes. Hindi pa siya analysis per se. It's the preparation of your data towards analysis. So I just call it data organization. So we're gonna explore that. Kasi it's a very practical thing. Like I said, it will, if you take it seriously, it will help you be more efficient with all the data that you've gathered. So in this workshop series pa lang, is that from my end? Perhaps we can.
Nota, please unmute yourself na. Kasi minute ko lahat.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Nota. I can hear you.
Okay. So from this workshop series, ang dami ng data, right? I hope it's okay. I will, every now and then, I'll revert to my mother tongue, which is Tagalog. Marami kayong data for this whole workshop series. They've taught you how to get or where to get the secondary data, the one about Filipino ethnographies and indigenous peoples. You also have primary data. So you've gone to the workshop on how to gather data on village community and annual cycles, visual data from visual ethnography, how to do interviews with key informants, how to do participant observation, rapid ethnographic assessment, and material culture. I don't know kung matutuloy siya, but
it will proceed on Monday afternoon.
Okay, so you can just look back na lang here kasi I'm trying to pull everything together. So what do you do with all of this data, secondary and primary? How do you distill the different kinds of data for use in your analysis? Para siyang if you were to think metaphorically, para siyang nagbuhol-buhol na yarn. You can have so much data, but you don't know how to untangle them. So how will you get to an analysis? And that's what we're problematizing. A cat is an appropriate metaphor also because in the beginning, the cat is having fun tangling the threads. Pero after so much threads have been tangled, mahirap na siya i-untangle. So data organization can be the systematic way of doing that. So how do you get from here na sala-salabit yung threads in your mind, from there to a more orderly arrangement of all the threads that are in your head? And okay, just a warning. So there are two approaches kasi. The first is the traditional way, which is structured and rigorous. And that's what we're going to talk about today. The structured and rigorous way of organizing your data from analysis that comes from standardized research, which is patterned after the scientific method. So kahit na hindi to quantitative research approach, the ethnographic approach is qualitative, diba? Even so, there is actually a science to it. We follow that science. I mean, we're looking for empirical evidence. We're being very systematic about producing concepts and theories. So may rigor siya. On the one hand, yung standardization and the rigor, they give you concrete guidelines to follow. So if you're a beginner, like I think some of you are, is everyone a beginner? Parang may different levels of skills na kayo in research, tama ba? If I remember the Excel file.
Yeah, that's correct. Some of them have doctoral degrees, especially the Vice President for Academic Affairs. She did her research on the Kabihug, but her approach, I think, is not in terms of the cultural aspect or the ethnographic aspect. I think it's more focused on linguistics. If I'm correct, Dr. Rosalie is there. She can speak about what she did. But most have had experience of qualitative research. Okay. It's just that it's not ethnographic.
Okay. Okay. So in ethnographic approach, we also have rigor, but it's a little more maluwang. Kasi the field work allows us to flex and be iterative with the data. But there is a rigor to it that we also concern ourselves about. We question it, but we're also concerned about it. So on the one hand, it provides guidelines for you to follow. On the other hand, ano siya, pwede siyang, I think this was discussed in the workshop on indigenous peoples, the way that researchers should be concerned about local knowledge and producing local knowledge from the local knowledge. So if we just keep following the research standards, pwedeng it's very Western oriented, or it takes for granted that it is science directed. Baka there are other ways of analyzing or organizing your data. So those two things. Kaya the second approach is more experimental and instinctive. I've done this only a few times. It's fun kasi you get to follow your instincts about it. And it can make subaltern voices heard. It can foreground it kasi you're not following scientific methods per se. But I feel that based on my experience, if you follow the rigor of data organization, mas mapapalitaw mo nga the marginalized voices from the global south. Kasi the rigor ensures that your theorizing or your conceptualizing comes from your data. Meaning, ikaw as a researcher, you're not over-interpreting. Hindi mo uunahan yung data. And for me, the rigor can do that. At the same time, the experimental and instinctive, medyo nagiging trend na siya. Like an analytical trend. So, and if it becomes a trend, then you're also following the standards that are being set by the West. So if you really want to bring out the subaltern voices, I see no problem with doing the more rigorous data organization. So from discussing how, we also realize why. Why do we need to be rigorous about it? What's the structure for? And there are two reasons why. The first is for your research to achieve internal validity. That what you say, what you claim you're investigating is really what you're investigating. Meaning, tahi-tahi, from your research question, yun ang nag-i-inform ng theoretical framework mo, which informs your review of literature, theoretical framework, which informs your data gathering tools, like your interview guide. Dapat yung questions in your interview guide nanggagaling from your overall research question, right? So tahi-tahi siya, all the way down to how you organize your data, and then how you analyze it, and then how you conclude or theorize about your data. So yun ang validity, internal validity. External is about being able to replicate it. But in anthropology, we're not very concerned about replicating our studies kasi every context is unique. May assumption na kami of cultural relativism. The second very important reason why we want to look at the rigorous way of organizing data is to enhance reflexivity, meaning the way that the researcher becomes conscious about how you are mediating the data, how you are part of the knowledge production. Kasi ikaw yung magsusulat eh. Also, even before you write it, ikaw yung nag-i-interpret ng data. And the rigor helps temper that. Kasi minsan, pag masyado kang, if you're not rigorous about it, you're not structured, you can put your theory before the data, and that's something that we don't want also in research, lalo na in the ethnographic approach. So we're going to do the number one, structured and rigorous. Pero from there, pwede na rin kayo mag-explore. I'll give you alternative, abbreviated versions para hindi masyadong detailed also. So how we wish we were like Freddie Highmore in The Good Doctor, where titingin lang siya sa isang sulok and everything factors already, nalilinis yung data, and then he finds a solution. But mere mortals. We're not like him, no. So we engage in an invisible process, a very complex process of several cognitive processes. We read, we sift through the data, we put them in an order, we consolidate and synthesize them, and we interpret the data in order to form concepts and theories, right? To develop them. So may parang all at once, whenever we're doing research, there are three types of understanding that we are trying to do. Tapos ito, there's no formula for this. Each person will have their unique way of understanding your research for yourself. And then critical understanding, meaning you can step outside of your own research and understand it from outside. Theoretical, to connect it with a body of work on that topic. So more often than not, we are the good doctor on a bad day. Medyo nako-confuse tayo. We get overwhelmed with the data that we have. We need to submit by the deadline. We have theoretical biases then. And we take this for granted, but oftentimes it's informed by the funding. And if we're working in research teams, nakadepende siya sa team dynamics. Like I have heard of local researchers when they partner with foreign research teams, the theoretical paradigms can shift greatly. Tapos the local researcher is unable to sift through the data with local theory, no? Na-pressure to align with foreign theoretical paradigms. Also, current theoretical trends to seem cutting edge, maybe there's a pressure for that, especially when you comply with global standards in the university. I'm sure you're familiar with this. Tapos, our individual concerns and struggles for tenure, publish or perish. So that can really affect how we organize our data. Some of the techniques that we already do, mga soft organization of data, not necessarily systematic, but they help, no? They help sort the data into chunks. I would include review of related literature. Doing a review of related literature is actually a way of sorting your secondary data from the literature. Kasi you're putting it in an argument, in a coherent flow based on your argument, no? So naayos mo na siya. You've organized that data. In terms of primary data, the one you get for yourself, even documentation is a way of sorting. So I think one of the workshops taught you about the three types of notes, tama ba? The mental notes, the jotted notes, the field notes, even journaling for your personal feelings, personal experience, recording, audiovisuals, and the observation guide. Yung participant observation, I'm not sure because I was unable to attend it. I'm not sure if they prescribed to you that observation guide. It's a one sheet of paper where you jot down your observation of an event or whatever you need to observe in the field. Also transcription of interviews para the raw data is in a handy form for you to organize, no? And then you can thematically code it. So these are things that we already do, I think. But if we want to be more systematic about it, so just look at the middle column. The left column is the inputs from this workshop series. The middle column is what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about these more systematic techniques of data management, description from the managed data, and then explanation from the description. Magfo-flow siya from one to the next. The third column is about the possible qualitative analysis that you can do. We're not going to talk about them. Pero the reason why I put them in this table is to show you what the problem is, no? From the first column to the third column, paano ka tatawid in a way that does not compromise the validity of your research. And that is why there is data organization. It helps you tawid to the other side into your analysis. It preps you for analysis in so many ways. I'll show you later. Okay, so the first one is data management, just managing your data. Kasi very, very unwieldy, no? You have all these transcripts, you have all the literature, you have participant observation, any notes you took from the field, you have pictures, you have village cycles, annual cycles, etc. Ano, di ba? How do you put them together? So the first level of work is what they call scaffolding. Gagawa ka muna ng scaffold. You familiarize yourself with the data using an index. Gagawa ka ng index of themes or concepts that you can get from your data. You identify recurring themes or ideas from your data gathering, and then you devise a conceptual framework or an index. You apply that index on, before you apply that index, you sort the themes muna. You categorize them into sino ba yung main theme, and then may sub-themes siya. I'll show you the framework after this slide. And then you number each, and then you use those numbers to index your data. Index, just like in a book, when there's an index, the numbers just refer you back to the page, back to the data. So the initial objective is just to sort your data so you can retrieve it later for analysis, for more data management and then analysis. So this is the framework. This is the thematic framework. So this is from the example of O'Connor and Molloy. They were studying the causes of homelessness among young lesbians and gay men. So from their data, nakita nila ito yung mga main themes. So the main numbers are the main themes. And then the numbers with the decimals, these are the sub-themes under the main themes. So there are 6 main themes and 44 sub-themes. The key to making your thematic framework is to make it, dapat ma-include niya lahat ng sub-themes from your data, but at the same time, it cannot be so long, so big, that you cannot use it to index your data. Dapat ano pa rin siya, usable, like it's big enough to be used in a thorough way. What does this remind you of? Does this remind you of anything? Does this look like anything to you in the data gathering process? And feel free to unmute yourself if you have an answer. Even you, Dr. Tondo. Diba, what is that document that we number? Tapos may mga sub-number. Doesn't this look like the outline of your questionnaire? Diba? Sometimes it looks like, the questionnaire looks like this. Kaya lang, the difference between the outline of the questionnaire and the thematic framework is, in your questionnaire, pwedeng you have these topics and subtopics in mind, pero the key informant, pag sumagot siya sa'yo, may i-include siya na ibang data that you didn't really ask about. But, you know, in the data gathering process, they think it's relevant. So kasama siya sa data. In that case, mag-e-expand yung outline. So the thematic framework, you can base it on your questionnaire if you think that's possible. Pero dapat kasi based on the data. So madadagdagan siya by what your key informants say. And then what do you do with this thematic framework once you've established that? You index your raw data using that, yung numbers. So this is an example. You have a transcript. The transcript contains your informant's answers, no, in paragraphs. Tapos, what do you notice on the right side? It's numbered according to the thematic framework in the previous slide. This one. So, ni-number niya everything relevant to that specific paragraph in your raw data. Tapos, what do you notice? Dito pa lang nagkakaroon na ng, you can have insights just by organizing your data. Do you notice that in these two paragraphs, laging magkasama si for at saka si to. And what is for and to? For is about sexuality. To is about the life history, what happens at home. So may association ka agad just by organizing your data. You know, the associations which will help you later on with your explanation para ma-analyze na yung data. They emerge already from data organization. So for and to. So you index all your data. You can index even your pictures. So if you took pictures and you know what they're about, you can base them on this thematic framework. Is this a picture of the housing crisis 3, right? But it's easier for you to refer to the pictures. You can number them. You can also number any of the data that you have, even secondary data or literature, you can number them. Para when you're talking about these specific themes and sub-themes, just by the number, visually, you can be alerted saan ka nagre-refer in your data, primary data, secondary data, and other data like pictures, etc. For your recording, dapat ma-transcribe siya. That's a thing. You have to transcribe all your interviews. Transcription allows you to increase the chances for research validity kasi you can pore through the verbatim text of your informant, and that prevents you from second guessing or from over interpreting what they mean because you have the transcript. It's very important to have your interviews transcribed. Okay, then when you index it like this, you fix it into a table, into a thematic chart. So per case, this looks matrabaho and time consuming, and indeed it is. Pero once you have this thematic chart, my gosh, the writing speeds up and it prevents you from over-interpreting. Kasi immediately you can refer to details just with this chart. So every case, for example, number 34, number 40, nandiyan na yung characteristics nila, right? And then in the second column 3.1 is a sub-theme. And you summarize their answer to that. Any other data they gave you that is relevant to 3.1, you write it here in a summarized way, in a way that you can understand. I mean, na-summarize na talaga siya. But if you look at this, yung ran away at 14 for 2 weeks, etc., it still contains the important data. So hindi ka pa tumatalon to a level of analysis, no? You're keeping true to the data. It's just that you shrank it. You summarized. Para when you've completed this thematic chart, you have a more manageable data set that you can write from. I hope this is landing. Stop me if it's malabo, but I'm hoping it's clear. Maybe give me a thumbs up if it's clear. Okay, so I'll proceed. So you can have, at least in the ethnographic approach, when you do key informant interview, you don't need to interview so many people. Wala tayong sample size that we're talking about. You can have, in fact, merong auto-ethnography, which is a sample of 1. So you can have that, or up to 10. Manageable pa yung data, no? Lalo na if you put it in a thematic chart like this. If you have more, you might want to use the program in vivo, but it's expensive lang. I don't know if you have institutional arrangements for purchasing that software, but if you have a huge chunk of data, baka you want to use the software. But when you do this mano-mano, I cannot stress enough the importance of how this mano-mano process gives you insight also. It makes your brain click in many ways. And then when you start writing, it can flow more because you went through this process. Okay, so now from the thematic chart, your yarns are put together in a very orderly fashion, di ba? Ready for use. Naka-ano na siya, naka-bunch together. It makes your unwieldy data orderly. It summarizes the bulk into a manageable amount. And it helps you discover themes. And these themes become the building blocks of your analysis. And ito, for validity purposes, it keeps as close to the data as possible. Meaning, nandun pa sa thematic chart yung key terms and the original expression that you got from your informant. And therefore, it minimizes over-interpretation by the researcher. You don't have to use your words yet. Pwedeng nanggaling pa sa informant. You will discuss ethics din yata by Monday. To be another session, but by design, just by data organization, you can enforce ethics. To be ethical kasi is to give justice to the sources of your data. That's one aspect of it. So the marginalized voices can be heard if you're rigorously managing your data. Kasi you're not over-interpreting it. You're pulling out from the data. So the next step is description. Description is about defining the dimensions of your topic and then categorizing into more abstract ideas and then classifying the categories into higher level of abstraction. So pataas na siya ng pataas. In fact, in textbooks, they call this the analytic hierarchy. So from raw data, you're summarizing, and then you are categorizing into more abstract ideas, and then you're moving into higher concept and theory. So from your thematic chart, you can bring out, you can put them in column A, based on one theme lang. For example, 3.7. So 3.7, 3 cases are shown here. So number 44, 38, 34. They each you have summarized their answers as they pertain to sub-theme 3.7, right? So tigigisang paragraph na lang sila. And then, on column B, you can start crunching that summary further. No, what is it about? Yun yung tanong dito when you do your column B. What are they really talking about? So see number 44, for example. Let's do number 34. Number 34 said she didn't like sleeping on the streets, very afraid, hasn't got a place to call home. It's been awful because thinking, la-di-da. So from there, you can get mga summary words na that are not over-interpretations pa rin. You're still getting it from the details of the summarized data. So for example, afraid, no place to call home, uncertainty about where she would sleep, etc., etc. Right? If you look at them, ano pa rin sila? Fair, they are fair abstractions from the first column where you summarize the raw data. So ano siya, unti-unti. I hope this is landing. Unti-unti siya, just to make sure that you're not colonizing your data with the way that you interpret, right? You're doing it slowly. And then in column C, medyo you're moving into more conceptual terms na. For example, loss of having a home, unpredictability, avoiding criminal activity, like being away from parents. Dito nga, I would push it. I would say freedom from parental influence. So you can use terminologies like that na. And it's still fair kasi that's still based on the data because you did it gradually. So it would look like this, no? Ayan, for 34, number 34. From the previous thematic chart, nilipat lang niya yung paragraph, yung summary of 3.7, and then made a column B out of it and a column C until the researcher reaches yung categories and classes, which you can start pulling into your analysis. Kasi if you start analyzing from raw data, number one, ang dami ng raw data. Number two, it can get all jumbled up, no? Hindi mo na distill. Para talaga siyang distillation process, like lambanog. How does it turn from tuba to something very fine, very pure? You're trying to extract the purer chunks of significant ideas from your chunky data. So as you move from column A to C, you're moving into higher levels of abstraction na, but you're doing it gradually para hindi ka mag-overinterpret. So now you've taken the threads and you've woven them together in a way na may order pa siya, right? During descriptive accounts, the researcher starts to categorize the data into conceptual classes, and the conceptual classes are more and more abstract or theoretical, moving further away from the language and heft of the data, but retaining their overall meaning. And for me, this is very important because that really assures, it's an important step to validity, research validity. Okay, so now we move to explanatory. So how do you move from description to explanation? And explanatory accounts means you're detecting patterns of association. Diba? What is being associated with what? In the previous data management slide, you remember, immediately we saw the association between theme 4 and theme 2. So nagpo-form na siya, no? 4 and 2 must be associated. They must have something to do with each other. Sexuality and life history. So you're detecting patterns. Tapos you're also verifying associations. Kasi the thematic chart and this data description chart should help you move across cases, within cases, and across cases. So mabe-verify mo kung this association holds true only for some of them, not all. So yun yung purpose niya. And then of course, you can develop associations. So read across the cases to find patterns. Example here would be between feelings about the housing crisis and the behavior that they need to do after they move out of their own home, the family home. So read within and across cases to find explanatory connections. So what's an example here? Just looking at this table, we can move from description to association. For example, ito, description ba to? Young lesbians and gay men generally have unpleasant feelings. Diba? That's fair for me to say as the researcher. I can say that because I have so much proof here on this table. They have fear, they have discomfort, they feel hopelessness, they feel uselessness about the impact of the housing crisis. So tama pa yung statement ko. It's valid. And I can say, I can push it, I can associate. I can say this is due to concerns over privacy and comfort, meaning they want their own space, nakalagay siya dyan in the table, and the uncertainty of their future, and the need to modify their behavior to suit their present accommodations. For example, because they're very unstable currently, after they moved out of their family's house, they avoid criminal activity para hindi sila matutunton. And then they try to get along with friends who give them temporary housing. So nape-pressure sila, dapat makisama sila dun sa nagbibigay ng pabahay. However, it's not all bad. So ito, I can associate this also. Just from this table, I can say, it's fair for me to say that not living with their parents also gives them a sense of relief and freedom from parental influence. So somebody here said she can spend her own money autonomously. Hindi nakikialam yung parents sa spending. And then number 38 also said They feel a sense of excitement. It feels like taking on the world the moment they moved out. So it's not all discomfort. So I hope this is clear. So the statements that I wrote down, I'm moving into analysis na. And the way that I organize the data helps me move into very fair, very valid statements like this. Tapos at any point, if I want to keep embellishing, kunyari, in your research, you want to add quotations or give the full detail of the emotion. Kunyari, you're doing narrative analysis. Narratives kasi need to bear the story of the person. So dapat nandun yung emotional investment of the person in the story. You can hugot it from the tables that you've prepared, from the thematic chart, as well as from the descriptive chart. So yan, you've woven them together. You've woven the threads together in a beautiful fashion. Meron na siyang aesthetic. Meron siyang, according to your research, aesthetic. During explanatory accounts, the researcher interrogates the description of the data set in multiple iterative ways. Iterative meaning, nagawa mo na once, babalikan mo siya, tatanong mo ulit, tama ba? Is that really what was meant? And then babalik ka ulit. So that's what's nice about the ethnographic approach is iterative siya. I think maybe this was discussed in the first workshop that you had about the introduction to ethnography. One of the characteristics is it's iterative. Bumabalik-balik siya, nagko-converse siya. It's not like natural science where you have a hypothesis, tapos pababa na lang siya. Ito, in ethnographic approach, it's circular. Yung movement ng researcher with the data, with the theorizing, with the writing. Researcher generally thinks around the data. You read through your synthesized data. You study the patterns. We're also interested in outliers. We're not just interested in the patterns that we find. Right, Dr. Tondo? We like looking at the nuances of culture. Yeah, that's fair to say. Sometimes we reread full transcripts depending on the kind of research that you're doing. For example, narrative analysis, you want to do narrative research. Rereading the full transcript kasi gives you the story of the person. Parang it allows you to really absorb it and therefore do justice when you do the narrative analysis. So it's a backwards and forwards thing between the data and then the emergent explanations until they click in your own mind. So explanations are actively constructed. You don't find them in the data. Meaning, yung role ng researcher is very important. In anthropology, we recognize how much the researcher is a part of the research itself. You're a very important variable. And as you practice this data organization, you figure out your own style of interpretation. You hone it, actually, you sharpen it. You can get also the explanations from the data itself. Kunyari, ang tanong mo, bakit? What's an example? For Bicol culture, for example, bakit? A popular question that outsiders of Bicol have for Bicolanos, bakit mahilig sa sili in the cuisine? So maybe your informants had explained it. Kasi ganito, ganito. In that case, you can get the explanation from them. But also, the researcher can infer from underlying logic, just in case they don't say it explicitly. Merong things that the people who bear the culture themselves, they don't really explain. Kasi who thinks about this, diba? Culture is taken for granted. We don't really think about why, diba? The why of our culture. So in that sense, the ethnographer can infer it from the underlying logic. Basta nakikita niya yung patterns of meaning in the data. So by juxtaposing, putting side by side, or interweaving, two apparently unconnected themes, or basing it on the repeated coexistence of two sets of phenomena that don't necessarily appear in proximity. Makikita mo yan, it will emerge from your data if you're very thorough about it. Using common sense to search for explanations. Ayan, we also do this. This is not to be taken for granted, especially because we go to the field, meaning we get a sense of how everyday life is also. So we factor that in. We develop explanatory concepts, things like medicalization, the minimedicalize depression, for example. That's a concept, explanatory concept that was created for that study. We draw from other empirical studies. So ito yung benefit of doing a review of literature. Or we use other theoretical frameworks, which is pretty typical. For example, gusto mo i-apply yung framework ni Bourdieu of habitus on the way you understand a cultural phenomenon. Pwede naman siya. So you can use those leads. So explanations are really actively constructed by the researcher. Yun lang, you can't be too fancy about it. The data is the determining factor. It has to match the data. And it has to retain the richness of the data to render research validity. So I'm going to show you two abbreviated versions. Yun yung long way. Yun yung ideal step-by-step of data organization. But I've also taught this to students who only have 1 month to do research. It's a soft research, just so they experience how to do research by themselves. So I teach them an abbreviated version, which I learned from a friend who studied research methods. So we developed this together. And this is the abbreviated version. In the first column, nandyan yung raw data. So the question here was, we went to vegan kasi this is based on our work in the Ateneo Social and Cultural Laboratory. We went to vegan studying cultural heritage. So kasama dun yung mga traditional food products nila like basi. So one of the questions was, paano ka nagsimula gumawa ng basi? They asked a traditional maker of basi, a very old man. So ito yung sagot niya. Matagal na tong paggawa ng basi sa mga ninuno pa. Bale, nung bata ako, tumutulong ako sa tatay ko. Hanggang sa pagtanda ko, ako na. Pero ngayon, di ko maturo sa anak ko kasi puro siya FB. So that's the raw data. I teach the students to find themes from the raw data kaagad. So the themes are descriptive. Ito yung descriptive phase. For example, the first theme is that basi making is passed down. They learn it by the passing down of that tradition. And it's passed down by family members. So the importance of family in passing down that basi making tradition. Pero the challenge now is it's not being passed down because kids have other activities like Facebook, social media. Tapos, as we move to analysis, so a higher level of abstraction. Yan yung interest natin eh. Kasi it's the higher levels of abstraction that allow us to connect with the knowledge that has been produced about this topic. Kasi other studies will also discuss it from a higher level of abstraction. And also because we're trying to theorize. Ang theory is basically a systematic way of explaining something. So don't be too intimidated by theory then for the beginners who are in attendance. It's just you trying to come to a certain level of systematic explanation. Yun lang yung theory. So the third column is you trying to do that by coming up with concepts or using concepts that you can anchor your theory on. So for example, passing down of basi making, you can speak of tradition. So basi making is a tradition. And this tradition is learned through socialization from family members, right? Socialization is another concept. And then lastly, significance of the intervening factors, intervening variables on family socialization into the basi making tradition. So higher level of abstraction na siya. And the third column is what you write down in your research. You're not going to write down what the basi maker said in the first column, unless you want to quote him. Quotations are very useful because they give emphasis to a point that you want to make in your paper, or they tell the reader how the informants think about certain things or how they say certain things. So pwede mo siyang gamitin din, but only after you've made your point. And the point comes from the higher level of abstraction. This is another one. Dito iba naman yung approach. The first abbreviated version I'm showing you is from the raw data papunta sa analytic concepts. The second one, I did this for a class that I took in UP Diliman under Brother Guazon, Dr. Guazon. We went to Baguio to study the Pang-Aghamtao, and he already had a theoretical framework for the class. All we had to do was to implement that theoretical framework by developing data gathering tools para makita namin yon in action. So medyo baligtad siya ng konti. Pero in this table, it's weaving all of that together horizontally. So the first column shows you the narratives. Ito yung verbatim from the interview of different cases. The orange boxes are the names because I want to keep them anonymous. So somebody said number 1, somebody said number 2, pero all of them are about motive 1, which is the originating of the Pang-Aghamtao, how it started. Tapos, in the themes and motives, sinasummarize ko na rin siya. Look at the second column. So, ang summary niya is, the Pang-Aghamtao was started to uplift Baguio. Kasi remember, during the 1991 earthquake, talagang na-shatter sila emotionally and economically. So, tinry nilang bawiin both economics and the spirit of the people by creating that festival. And then the analysis is the third column. So I try to piece out yung idea in the second column, no? That it started with shared empathy due to the common experience of the earthquake in 1991. So the earthquake is a starting point of convergence. B, it's for convergence, and it was made official, that's B. And then C is for tourism purposes. Tapos, kinabit ko na siya dun sa theoretical framework, which is the final column, which is in the literature, kasi that was the objective for the class. Pero it's the same thing. We're moving from raw data to higher levels of abstraction, and we're doing it gradually. And we're making sure that the ideas are coming from the data, meaning hindi iniimbento ni researcher. And that's how you assure then the research validity. I keep reiterating that it's very important. So why do this? The main purpose of doing this is because out is through. You go through it, you get out of it if you have gone through it. No, it's the climb, according to Miley Cyrus. It's the climb. Because this process unlocks your insight. And as you keep doing this, you get better at it. It becomes a faster process for you. You develop the instinct for it, no? If you're too busy or masyadong marami yung raw data, you can also think about using computer-assisted data organization and analysis. Locally, I think NVivo is available, but it's very expensive na. If there are institutional arrangements to get it, then maybe it's something to look into. Pero I have also read that even seasoned qualitative researchers, they prefer the mano-mano because it does teach you the way to analyze data. It helps make things click in your own mind, and you generate deeper insight lalo na ethnographic insight when you do this. Yung alternative is the more free-flowing analysis, but that depends on your research design. I've seen this done for researchers about movement in terms of materiality, objects as they move, or maybe migrants. I think that was Dr. Tondo's presentation, tama ba? The migrants. So
Yes, Nota.
I don't know if you've explored that, pero I have read something along those lines. Ingold, in particular, Ingold is very good at that movement, free-flowing type of analysis. Si Crapanzano is also may pagka-free flow yung analysis nila, not very structured. But that also takes research experience and exposure to examples for you to be able to execute it and give justice to your data. You can practice. I can give you the readings. Just let me know how I can give you the readings, but you can practice. One of the articles that I can give you is the interview with the medicine man, nandun yung transcript. And you can create a thematic framework based on a transcript. Short lang yung pinesent niya na transcript doon. Create a thematic framework, then a thematic chart, and then a descriptive account, and then draw an explanatory account. And then compare that with Rover's explanation, which is also in that article. So pwede niyong pag-practicean to if you don't have your own research yet in progress. You can also read anthropological literature to get the sense of how, ano ba yung ontology ng anthropology? Kasi doon nanggagaling yung ethnographic approach. Other fields, they like to apply the ethnographic approach, but it's very essential in the ethnographic approach, yung tenets of anthropology, which is holism. We look at all aspects of life. Hindi kami unilinear mag-isip. We don't think that only one variable causes this. We tend to look at the wholeness of everyday life. And we also mind cultural relativism, that culture influences the way people think and behave in society. So if you want to get a feel of that, there's a nice book that can give you an idea of how anthropology thinks based on these topics. I can also give you a copy, as long as it stays with us, para we respect also the book itself. And that's it. I hope you get excited and get more organized with your data. So we can have questions now, if you have questions. Are there questions?
Pwede bang magsalita yung mga tao? Baka nangatulog lang kayo dyan. Actually, the data processing is probably the most exciting part of research, but it's also the most difficult. No? Yung part
Yeah.
natin.
But the rewards are high.
Yes. I did more than 100 interviews. No? Yes, I did.
Did you use NVivo?
And some interviews lasted for 2 hours. Yung longest yata is 2 hours and 30 minutes. Talagang nagra-rumbling talaga yung migrants in New Zealand because she was so disappointed with how her life has turned out. No? Marami siyang angst. So, pinabayaan ko lang. So, the recording continued, etc. Mainly because my approach was semi-structured to remove certain biases for leading questions. So, the only thing I asked them would be, tell me your story of how you came to New Zealand. In that sense,
narrative.
how you came. narrative approach. So, yun. Sa atin naman, when we are interviewing, you cannot just tell the person, tapos na po after 1 hour. Pag gusto pang magsalita yung tao, no? But even if you know that you have really exhausted everything, no, sa lahat ng aspeto, and they still continue, hindi tayo basta-basta penalitas. But that's completely different with the experience of my conversations with the migrants of Malaysia and Singapore. Why? The migrants of Filipino migrants of New Zealand have their own apartments and they have their own homes. No, yung mga matagal na, they're already living there. They're residents, no, and some are New Zealand nationals na. Okay, so they're settled. Now, when we talk about mobile migrants, especially in Malaysia and Singapore, wala silang apartment because they live with their employer. So nandun yung dynamics ng domestic space, no? How the power, the power struggle within the power differentials in the domestic space. And mostly it would be woman against woman. Kasi it's the women in terms of Asian cultures would be in charge of the domestic space. So doon lumalabas yung iyong mga pagbabasa sa related literature, no? What would be the power dynamics in terms of domestic space, in terms of ano yung relationship ng gender sa particular space ng buhay ng tao, or even yung geographical space like the home, no? So and then I had to do the interviews either dun sa hangout nila sa Lucky Plaza. And ang dami-dami talaga. It's so noisy. Kung minsan sumasakit ang ulo ko sa pakikinig doon sa mga sa mga tapes. But they are shorter. Yeah, you can only interview them for about 15 minutes kasi yun yung time na nag-hangout lang sila sa Lucky Plaza and they just tell you their stories parang compressed na 15 minutes. Or yung pag-attempt ko ng mga ritual sa simbahan na before the mass, interviewin ko sila, simbang gabi, no? Simbang gabi kasi yung sinundan ko dun sa Singapore. Before the mass, yung mga 15 minutes or 30 minutes before the mass, kasi nandun sila, maaga-maaga sila para nga makaupo. And then,
so how did you analyze, how did you organize all of that?
Yung organization nga would be, I'm lucky because I was doing my doctorate sa University of Canterbury, and we had this technology called the end notes, no? So you put in the transcript in the end notes, and then you can also put in the tape, the audio tape, no, within the end notes. But I also had while the interview is going on, I also had my notebook. So, ninonote ko kasi yung oras, anong oras niya sinabi yun. Kasi pagdating mo sa tape, pwede mong na i-identify yung mismong sa translation.
Para retrievable.
And not only that, which parts do they get emotional? Yun yung doon. Pag nag-umpisa na silang nangingilid na yung luha, nanginginig din yung boses, that is really the important point according to Prasabayan sa Anthropology of Emotions. That means that this is the most important point for the narrative, no? Dito ito ang point of contention para sa tao. Mano-mano kasi yung ginawa ko, talagang ang hirap, talagang grabe yung
pagsort. Mahirap siya, but very rewarding kasi nga it helps you, nakiklik siya in your mind may neuronal connections.
And I also made my journals kasi aside from the things that are happening on fieldwork, I also had my journals. So isusulat ko doon sa journals, ano yung pinaka-striking sa isang araw na ito ng fieldwork? And what did this particular person say to me that actually made sense, no? So, yun nga, after a while, from the migrants of New Zealand are completely different kasi nandun sila sa state na stable sila. May mga angst sila, but not as bad as the DWs, mostly DWs of Malaysia and Singapore. So sa Malaysia and Singapore, the trending topic would be how they are treated in the domestic space. Yun ang trending topic. Talagang pag tinignan mo yung lahat ng narratives, lahat sila nandun. And that's the reason why they go to the church. It's not because really more, yung dun is, this is the space where they can be themselves, where they can regain freedom as human beings. Kasi pag nasa domestic space sila, sabi nga ng isang narrative, no? Ay, kahit Sunday, kahit wala naman akong, day off ko naman, pero pag nakita ka nila ng Sunday, uutusan ka pa rin nila. Kasi in their mind, pag nandiyan ka, pwede kang i-bother. So, maalis siya, pumunta siya either sa Lucky Plaza or sa simbahan, kasi yun yung time na hindi siya pwedeng utusan ng kahit sino. So, there is that dynamic of freedom. No? They regain their freedom as human beings. But anyway, this is the most exciting part. But I also told my supervisor at the time when I came back, I am also overwhelmed by data. I am totally overwhelmed. Kasi yung lahat ng sensations mo, you are being challenged everywhere, no?
Everywhere. You're understanding yourself. You're understanding the topic.
Yep.
You're worrying about how you're gonna write it. Tapos, ma'am, as you were describing, na-imagine ko na yung indexing. Like
tapos
in the story, ito yung topics that were relevant.
I felt very stressed. 2 to 3 weeks after my field work, yung talagang unang visit ko kasi the other person who went away with me, 6 months kasi kami yung unang 6 months tapos pabalik-balik ka na Yung una kong nakasabay sa na who was sent to Malawi was requested to go back. Kasi dun sa data nga niyang nakulit, ang supervisor, we had the same supervisor, and she was asked to go back to Malawi, Africa. Can you imagine? Sabi ko, talagang grabe yung nervous ko. Oh my God, baka padala niya ako sa Malaysia, Singapore. But I was quite willing. I totally enjoyed Malaysia and Singapore. But I did go back to Malaysia and Singapore when I started writing na, just to validate everything that is being written sa aking chapters ng Malaysia and Singapore. Eventually, I had to let go of Malaysia, mainly because my supervisor found the thesis very, very long na daw kasi ang talagang mahaba talaga yung kasi qualitative research. Hindi mo naman pwedeng i-shortcut. So, what I did was a part of my Malaysia, field notes and research went into the Ateneo, Philippine Ethnographic.
Yeah, so that's
what
one.
I published there. That's
one benefit of data organization. If you're able to do those charts systematically, you can decide which ones you're going to use for what paper. Madali na siyang hugutin.
Ang pinaghahandaan ko ngayon yung Simbang Gabi ng Singapore. I'm trying to prepare a transcript for the Simbang Gabi of Singapore because I followed it up bago nag-COVID, 2018, I think. I was in Singapore 2018. Ayan. So, sariwa pa yung follow-up ko. Hindi pa dumarating sa 5-year period, pwede pa isunod. So anyway, mga people of CNSC, why are you so quiet? Kami lang yata ni Ma'am Nota ang kuusap dito. Anyone who wants to join. Si Dr. Rosalie, I saw her coming in. Si Dr. Rosalie had a very, very interesting experience among the kabihug. Doc Rose. Si Doc Melanie. Si Doc Melanie is majoring in communications development yan. So linguistics din yung yung approach niya sa kanyang PhD. Just to explain to people why I say linguistics, kasi sa anthropology may four-field approach kasi kami, no? So anthropology of linguistics, so linguistics approach, anthropology, archaeological anthropology, which means material culture, physical biological anthropology, meaning to say, may biology yan, yung mga ethnobotanist natin pwede pumasok doon, no? So yung isang yung looking at the plants and the relationship of human beings to plants. Tapos ang apat, yung social and cultural anthropology, where you take a look at culture. Dito pumapasok yung mga ritual, ito yung pumapasok yung yung quotidian experiences of people. Dito rin pumapasok yung seasonal experiences, yung pinag-uusapan ni Ma'am Chims, di ba si Dr. Chim Sayas, no? Cynthia Sayas, yun ang pinag-usapan nila, yun ang pinag-usapan natin ng input nila. So, yun po yung yung approaches. Nakita ko lumabas na si Doc Rose. Doc Rose, nandiyan ka pa? Si Doc Melanie.
Yes, Madam. Good afternoon.
Say bas. Sige, ma'am. Go ahead.
Ma'am, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
In one of my studies din po, I conducted immersion with the indigenous people. And in terms of the data, I mentioned this in one of our meetings that first I built rapport with the indigenous people. I didn't immediately get the data that I needed. For a number of months, the purpose is to build rapport with the indigenous people so that they have this trust to reveal the information that I needed. And when I got this opportunity to get now the data, yun po, ang pinaka gamit ko talaga nun is the recorder. I had with me the tape recorder. Tape recorder pa po nun, hindi cellphone. Tape recorder, yung maliit na tape recorder na maliit din ang tape niya. Maliit lahat. And then after conducting the interview, I had in-depth interview and I had also focus group discussion. After recording all the information.
How many did you have? How many interviews tsaka FGD?
I had 15 informants po, ma'am. So 15
1-5.
Yes po, 1-5. And I had 3 FGDs. 5
Okay.
informants per group.
Okay. And
For
then
me
you
to
also
validate.
had notes from your immersion.
Yes, ma'am. I had my diary. Every day I went to the place. I have to record everything. From those I recorded.
So how did you organize your data?
Per visit po, ma'am. Basta everything I noticed, everything that they say, new words, new information, although these are not part of the study, pero tinitingnan ko na baka sa analysis ng discussion ko, baka kailangan ko ito. So I record all this. On a per hour basis, something like that. Basta everything po na nakikita ko, nilalagay ko anong oras, exact date, exact na oras, para alam ko kung kailan ako pumunta doon at kailan nila ito sinabi.
Oo. And
There might be other factors that might affect them sa pagsabi nila ng ganito. Opo. Tapos, once I got the recorded data, transcription na po, ma'am. I transcribe everything. May mga language po sila na manidi talaga. So I asked the assistance of a kabihog. I asked her to translate it to Filipino or Tagalog for me to understand. And when I used this data in the writing process of my dissertation, I translated all this to English. Pero po, dun sa discussion ko, may manide, may Tagalog, may English.
Do you think the tables that are showing kanina, do you think that will be useful for you? Like,
yes, ma'am, yes.
Henceforth?
Yes po, yes. Yes, ma'am. So
Kasi
those
it's
were
really
my...
handy eh. Handy siya sa di ba, pag-summarize para hindi na marami yung 15 interviews and 3 FGDs. Marami pa rin yun, di ba? Like
yes
if you
po,
have them
marami.
transcribed.
Yes, yes.
Pero if you can do it systematically, liliit siya ng liliit. Tapos
yes,
sure
po.
Ka na yung data nandun pa rin.
Ito na, yes po. Kasi ma'am, una talaga una nga, sabi ko, parang hindi nasagot yung mga objectives ko. Parang wala. Pero matulog lang ng ilang sigurong gabi. Parang basa ko ulit. I read again the transcription. Sabi ko, nandito pala. Siguro napagod lang kaya hindi ko kaagad nakita. Pero when you go deeper dun sa data na nakukuha po natin, nandun ang sagot.
Tsaka when you reread, nakikita yung association. Usually kasi pag culture yung inaaral, there's a misconception na all the researcher has to do is to describe.
Yes.
But that's not the only thing we're doing. We're also trying to explain.
Yes po.
Tapos pag explanation, medyo mas masalimuot na siya kasi you have to be sure ano yung, di ba? The way that you explain it. So nakakatulong if your data is organized.
Yes po, yes ma'am. That's correct. Okay, thank you po.
Thank you too. Are there other questions? Time check, it's 2:15.
Si Doc Melanie, baka may gustong sabihin kasi communication development si Doc Melanie. Doc Mel. Nakita ko yung si Doc Mel nandito eh.
Good afternoon po. So far
Si
po,
Doc Mel ang Dean ng College of Arts and Sciences
good afternoon po.
Sige ma'am, go ahead.
So far po, I have no questions po. Nakikinig po ako ng maigi at excited na po na mai-apply yung mga napakinggan natin.
Siguro yung mga lahat ng dumaan sa proseso ng qualitative research, no? Going through your field work, tapos interviewing people. This would be the time to ask our resource person yung mga passing questions, yung mga tanong ninyo sa nangyari sa fieldwork and how you organize your data. Sa akin kasi, ang ginawa ko, okay, andun yung lahat ng niyan. Pero yung style ko, yung sineparate ko din yung sa ritual na yung mga symbols na I was watching the sinulog, no? I was doing participant observation of the sinulog and I was there in the venue. So hiniwalay ko yung mga pictures, yung lahat ng mga kinuha kong pictures, may hiwalay na folder yon. Including yung lahat ng mga nakita kong ginamit na symbolic items dun sa ritual mismo, aside from the costumes. Kaya nakahiwalay lahat yun. You know why? Because when you are writing your fieldwork notes, itong visual documentation actually helps you to pay more attention to the details of what happened, no? Na kung minsan nami-miss mo habang nangyayari yung event. Kasi nga pinag-usapan namin doon sa visual ethnography yung reenacted events, no? Mahirap gawin kung minsan yung reenacted events kasi in the first place mas magastos yun, unang-una mas magastos sa field worker, etc. So yung visuals nakakatulong talaga yun sa documentation so that we can remember what actually happened in the field work. Like for example, when I was describing, St. John Cathedral, saan nakaupo yung mga migrants, etc., etc. If you have the visual, documentation of what you actually saw, then you are able to, kahit hindi mo na-include sa original fieldwork notes mo, you can still be able to describe it accurately, kung anong itsura ng lugar at kung saan nakaupo yung mga migrants, no? So, yun ang importante. Kasi kung minsan, sa sobrang dami nang nangyayari, hirap na hirap tayo makapture kaagad sa unang fieldwork notes natin. No? So, you need to be able to review your materials na nag-gather mo sa fieldwork again para mas accurate yung recollection mo nung nangyari. Like what Nota said, this actually the ethnographer really plays a lot of and a very important role sa ethnographic research. Why? Because you are the one seeing the whole thing, no? Na ikaw yung magsusulat ng account. So we need to be able to support what we write, no? Mga sabihin ko, ganito yung pagkakaupo ng mga migrant, tapos tinignan mo dun sa documentation, ibang-iba yung nakikita mo dun sa pictures, no? So it has to be supported by the visuals or the material artifacts that you have noticed being used by the migrants. Now, in the case of the Sinulog, they put the Bible in a Kawayan parang nilagay nila sa kawayan, no? Symbolizing the Filipino culture. But then I was able to relate it mainly because of related literature and a lot of readings, eventually to malakas and maganda, the bamboo. No? Why is the bamboo very, very important in Filipino culture? Mainly because our creation story begins with the bamboo. No? Yung sa Tagalog. Alam na alam yan ni Ma'am Nota kasi Tagalog culture yan, yung malakas and maganda. So while you wonder na in this Cebuano ritual of sinulog, you also see representations of the different local cultures of the Philippines. Although primarily it is really the Cebuano culture, in terms of our Christianization in the Philippines. Anyway, importante yun when we are doing when we are trying to make inferences, no? To really know kung ano yung kultura nitong pinag-aaral natin. And being a Filipino, I think helped me a lot in being able to write it. No? Kasi kung foreigner siguro ako, it will take 2 to 3 more years to really be able to relate everything. Ano yung bamboo na yan? Ba't nilagay nila sa bamboo yung yung Bible? Bakit hindi na lang kineri ng tao, no? Di ba?
Ma'am, may question in the chat box. I'll answer it now. So it's from Alvin Balyaran. Is it necessary to decide which data should be deleted, especially in transcribing information gathered from the interview? Topics na hindi related. Ideally, Alvin, you transcribe everything to make sure that your biases are not operating. That's the first level. So verbatim lahat. Ang pwede mo lang tanggalin, yung mga space fillers, yun lang. And then you replace them with ... Pero kunyari, they go off tangent. Ang pinag-uusapan nyo, Bicolano culture, kunyari, Bicolano food, tapos biglang ang pinag-uusapan niya yung family business. Isama mo pa rin siya kasi you don't know if later on may relevance pala. Sometimes kasi you wouldn't know until you look at the whole picture. So that is my answer to the question. Nasagot ba, Alvin? I hope it was answered.
Alvin, wag kang magde-delete basta-basta ng data. Kasi even yung mga informal conversations sa field na nilagay mo sa journal mo or sa diary, no? Actually, sometimes would mean something pagdating sa end ng analysis. Example ko, okay, sa Lucky Plaza, I was just loitering around. I saw some Filipinas seated there. Merong bar somewhere dun sa third floor yata yon. Senior moment, hindi ko maalala kung anong floor. But anyway, there were seats there on the Tapos, one person coming from the bar management invited them to go in. Ini-invite nila yung mga Pilipina. So I was there, I was just taking pictures, nakipag-hi ako sa kanila, nagpakilala. Anyway, so this guy comes in and says, and asks that, pwede ba kayo pumunta dun sa bar? Sabi ng mga Pilipina, ayaw nila. No, remember, this is not a formal interview, no? This would be my field notes. So anyway, the Filipinas said, no, ayaw namin. And then, so curious ako kasi researcher ka, no? Sabi ko, ba't nyo naman ayaw pumasok, baka libre yung inumin? At bakit sila nangungubida, no? Sabi niya, kasi po, sabi niya, pag may mga girls sa loob, may papasok din ng mga guys, mga customers. So ang parang binibate nila ngayon yung mga DWs natin sa Singapore to go into the bar so that the men would come in. Pwede sila mag-table, etc., etc. Tapos, sabi ko naman, ano naman yung reason nyo, ba't ayaw niyong pumasok? Ay, ano po yan? Ayaw namin ng mga ganyan kasi may pamilya kami, etc., etc. Now, later on when I was analyzing the data, looking back, ang laki ng ng impact noon sa data. Why? Because here is Lucky Plaza, supposedly quite a safe space for migrant workers to gather, and yet there is this bar upstairs enticing the Filipino women to go inside. And in their perception, that is a sinful place, yung perception ng mga nasa labas. Kasi may mga sinabi pa silang iba na kasalanan yan, etc. etc. So, don't delete anything, including your field notes. Kung may nakita kayong something unusual, don't do anything untoward by deleting the data. As much as possible, keep the original notes that you have taken, keep the original interviews that you have transcribed, and probably it may not make sense to you right at the end of your fieldwork, but it may make sense to you when you are writing down your report. Okay, so if you're writing an article, it will make sense. Kasi yung contract, kasi nagbabasa ka di ba? Marami ka nang nabasa mga related literature, so we are reviewing literature. Then actually, even in anthropology, when we analyze space, especially when we talk about specific holy places and specific sinful places, or gendered places. Very interesting ngayon yung yung data mo kasi nakita mo mismo, narinig mo mismo dun sa mga migrants that they're actually classifying spaces. Diba? They're, in their minds, they have classifications. Kasi narinig ko naman dun sa mga nandun sa simbahan na they actually think that they are safe in the church mainly because hindi makasalanan yung lugar. Dahil ang makasalanan lugar daw yung iba pang kasi may mga pok-pok daw na mga Pilipino that they, Filipino prostitutes daw. I never saw one, okay? These are accounts of migrants that I heard on my fieldwork. Don't delete.
Yeah, but that's a good question. Kasi nga, because of the bulk of the data, yung temptation to streamline it is there. Pero hindi pa, in the transcription, hindi pa dyan yung streamlining. The streamlining will happen later on. Well, if there's no more question, mukhang wala ng questions, ma'am. Mukhang okay na sila. Ay, ma'am, you're muted.
Doc Jocelyn, if there's no more question, pwede na siguro yung certificate of commendation for Ma'am Nota.
Wow.
So we would want to thank our resource speaker for that very interesting discussion about data processing and analysis. So at this juncture, we want to award the certificate of commendation to Ma'am Nota Magno in grateful recognition of her distinguished and invaluable service rendered as resource speaker during the Doing Ethnography Seminar Workshop held on July 30, 2021, thereby contributing immeasurably to the prestige and success of the event. Given this 30th day of July 2021 via Zoom platform. Signed, Dr. Marlo M. De La Cruz, CNSC President.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
With a nice layout.
In behalf of the team, of the OBI-Prep team, we thank you very much, Nota. I saw Press Suyen.
Yeah, she's here.
Preso yan, gusto mo magsalita ng konti? Or, I also saw Ami Rara. Okay, si Ami. So, Preso yan, gusto mo magsalita ng konti? Just to greet our participants kasi Ma'am Suyan.
Sorry, my computer died on me. That's why I have been very quiet and I am just listening. But I was saying that what Miss Nota shared is really very handy kasi in my time, when I was doing long-term research sa ethnography, mano-mano talaga, and up to now, mano-mano pa rin ako. So this is a more, even thematic analysis is something I continue to learn. So this sharing is very useful. Actually, I'm learning all as well from everybody's experience. Kasi yan nga yung parang kanya-kanyang experience na dinadaanan. And we make use of the instinct. Siguro ako very instinctive talaga Pero ganun nga yung process right after the interview, it's I write in the most illegible handwriting I could, and then at the end of the day transcribe those the notes immediately, then listen back on the recording, and tama that you chunk it according to the different topics and information. So that's it blends to what Miss Magno is saying. Yan nga, talagang low-tech ako. So I do my mano-mano system. And then before you can even write that narrative. So you chunk it together, you put ideas together, and then you can write the narrative before you can even make your analysis. So yun lang. So congrats.
Thank you.
Si Doc Ami. Doc Ami, andyan ka pa? Would you like to say something?
Parang she disappeared.
She disappeared na. Anyway, again, thank you very much, Nota.
Thank you too.
Medyo, I just had my vaccine today, kaya medyo umaano na yung side effects sa akin. I can feel it. Medyo,
ay, oo nga pala. Pahinga na ma'am. Pahinga ka na.
Papahinga yata ako. Kaya, but thank you very much for being our resource speaker for today. Nagbago kasi yung usapan nung yesterday kasi si Annie decided to go to Monday. Nang malaman niya yung ethics in ethnography, mag-move sa Monday, gusto rin niyang sumama doon. So I was there, I was listening. Kaya inisip ko, pwede naman siguro kasi kahit hindi ka na-consult, pwede naman siyang lumipat sa Monday at pwede natin ituloy yung ngayon kasi ito na yung pinag-usapan na original. Yun nga lang, talagang grabe yung pack talaga yung schedule ng mga faculty ngayon. Medyo pagod sila. Very, very, ang tawag yan, yung elections is very stressful sa iba, no? Kasi online yung voting yata. So hindi ko alam, actually I wasn't able to vote mainly because nandun ako sa vaccination center. But all is well that ends well, I think. Maganda naman yung ating usapan, and I think they learned a lot sa stages ng pag-organize ng data. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it may seem robotic, pero yung step by step niya is, I find it handy. Lalo when you're overwhelmed. Sometimes you need the step by step.
It's true. Okay. So kaya you did a lot. I think this is very, very important in terms of writing kasi ang ina-emphasize you don't just do research, you also publish.
Yeah.
So in terms of writing an article, importante talagang structured yung natin.
Yeah. And when you do the charts talaga, you can apportion it sa iba-ibang paper. Tapos madaling balikan yung data. You don't have to go through the transcripts. Yeah.
Okay,
Good luck with your research.
thank you, Nota. Thank you, Pres Suyen. Thank you rin, Ami, kung nakikinig pa si Ami. And thank you very much, my ka-ethnographers. Kasi nung una, nag-iisa ako. Ngayon, marami na akong kasama.
Yay!
So, yay!
May
Marami
tribo
tayong
ka na, ma'am.
ethnographers sa CNSC. Pwede na tayo mag-usap-usap kung ano yung style natin sa pag-gather ng data, pag-organize ng data. So now medyo marami-rami na akong makakausap sa CNSC in terms of ethnographic approach. So last point, paki-turn on po ang mga video at tayo ay magpipictorial na yung mga ngiti at sa ating attendance, no? At yung ating team ay kumuha na ng attendance. Ngiti po, pakibukas ang mga video at atin po ikukunin na ang ating attendance. Okay. Smile. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Okay. Second page. 1, 2, 3. Ilagay ko ito sa GC natin para kita niyo yung sarili niyo. Okay. Thank you very much. Na-capture na yung mga images. I will see you Monday kasi may flag raising daw tayo ng 8 o'clock na face to face, but after that please do come to the Zoom room for our last day ng doing ethnography. And I hope na may graduation tayo, may short graduation tayo dun sa mga naka-survive. Now I'm going to yung mga talaga yung iba pa, I'm thinking in terms of putting out all the videos, the video links. Gawin natin parang asynchronous yung may mga na-miss kayo na mga videos, ilalagay natin doon sa GC. Try to look at it and then let me know ito sa honesty honesty system ang gagawin natin. Tapos sabihin niyo sa akin kung napanood niyo, kung halimbawa umabsent kayo, napanood niyo. Dapat sasabihin nyo sa akin na panood nyo at I will take your word. I will really believe you kasi tapos pwede na kayong bibigyan ko kayo ng isa pang pagkakataon na kasi sabi ko nga bakit ba hindi, sige na let us be compassionate and generous, no? So bigyan ng pangalawang pagkakataon yung mga nakamiss ng session, pakipanood po yung mga links na ipopost namin sa GC. And then give us your evaluations. Ang pinaka-importante doon yung evaluations ng mga sessions. So that you can get your certificates, no? Diba? Second chance yan. Everybody deserves a second chance. So yung mga na-miss din yung sessions, kasi may mga deans na nandito si BPAA, nandito yung ating quality of assurance. Alam ko kung gaano ka-busy yung mga yan. Talagang nahihirapan silang doon sa time natin. So those people, and even those na nawawalan ng connection, this will be your chance.
Ma'am, busy talaga.
This will be your chance to second chance, no, to do the seminar workshop again. Watch everything and then make sure that you submit your evaluations. Okay po? Malinaw po, malinaw. Sige. Maraming salamat po.
Yes,
See you
ma'am.
Monday. See you
Thank you very
Monday.
much po.
I-start tayo ng 8:45, 8:45. So because
Yes,
yung
ma'am.
ethics medyo madugo yung ethics. Baka doon tayo kasi ang ethics ang magiging style nila talagang discussion. Mag-aano tayo ng mga issues kasi bibigay nila yung yung mga ethical guidelines and then we will discuss kung paano ang application nito pagdating sa fieldwork. Thank you. Maraming salamat po. Bye.